It began with a whisper in the corridors of power. A late-night message slipped through an encrypted channel. They're watching their own. In New Delhi's North Block, the seat of India's most powerful intelligence bureau, the IB, fluorescent lights flickered above endless rows of beige desks and outdated computers. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and paranoia. Officers who once hunted foreign spies now found themselves turning their gaze inward, onto ministers, activists, journalists, and even fellow agents. The year was 2013. On paper, India's Intelligence Bureau was tasked with protecting the nation from terrorism, espionage, and threats to national security. But in the shadows, something darker was brewing. A secret directive had been issued, one that blurred the lines between security and surveillance, between patriotism and political manipulation. An IB officer, who would later flee the country, remembered the night it started. "We were told to monitor a list," he said quietly to an investigative reporter years later. "Not terrorists, not insurgents, politicians, civil servants, even the Prime Minister's rivals." The list came from the highest levels of government, dozens of names. Activists who criticized policy decisions, bureaucrats suspected of disloyalty, and journalists probing too deep into corruption. Their phones were tapped, their emails cloned, their homes watched. Inside the Bureau's surveillance division, agents worked around the clock in a soundproof basement. Screens glowed with live feeds. The hum of servers filled the air. Conversations from private homes echoed through headsets. "Target 3 just met an opposition leader," one operator would say. "Record everything," came the reply. It was meticulous, relentless, and illegal. When word of this internal surveillance leaked to a small circle of senior officers, panic spread like wildfire. Some wanted to expose it. Others insisted it was national interest. But the truth was clear. India's oldest intelligence agency had crossed into forbidden territory. It was no longer just collecting intelligence. It was shaping politics. One of the first to question the operation was R.K. Mathur, a veteran officer known for his integrity. In a memo he never sent, he wrote, "We were trained to protect the Constitution, not any one man's power." That memo would be found years later in his personal archive, after his mysterious death ruled a heart attack. Meanwhile, opposition leaders began suspecting something. Their meetings were being leaked to the press. Private calls appeared word for word in newspapers. Cameras were spotted near their homes. When one parliamentarian confronted the Home Ministry, he was dismissed with a smile. "You're being paranoid," they told him. But he wasn't. In the following months, journalists began noticing patterns. Stories that exposed government critics vanished overnight. Newsrooms received quiet calls from unnamed officials. Editors were warned to avoid sensitive topics. A chilling message echoed through Delhi's media circles. They know everything. In one of the most disturbing revelations, a whistleblower from the Bureau leaked documents showing that surveillance wasn't limited to phone tapping. The IB had infiltrated protest movements, NGOs, and student organizations. Undercover agents posed as volunteers, recording conversations, taking photos, building psychological profiles. One report, later obtained by an investigative portal, described a female student leader as potentially disruptive and recommended long-term observation. She later claimed that her emails were hacked and that she was followed for months by men on motorbikes. When the story broke, the government denied everything. The Home Minister appeared on television, calm and confident, dismissing the allegations as baseless and politically motivated. But behind closed doors, the Bureau was in chaos. Orders were given to shred documents, erase logs, and reassign key officers. Still, traces remained. A data analyst, brought in from a private firm, had backed up portions of the IB's internal communications. He later turned whistleblower, handing over encrypted files to an independent journalist. Among them were transcripts of intercepted calls, internal memos, and one particularly haunting message from a senior officer. "The system must protect the party, even if the law doesn't." The leak set off a chain reaction. For the first time, the Indian public saw glimpses of how deeply the state had turned its surveillance inward. Reports surfaced of secret monitoring stations across the country. Rooms without windows, guarded by armed personnel, their operations logged only in handwritten notebooks. Inside one such station in Hyderabad, an anonymous source described a chilling scene. Rows of operators, hundreds of calls monitored simultaneously. No oversight, no warrants, just orders. As journalists dug deeper, one name surfaced repeatedly: Project Netra. Officially, it was a defense project to monitor online threats. In practice, it became the backbone of India's domestic surveillance network. Through it, the IB could intercept social media posts, emails, and online chats in real time. Every keyword, every dissenting opinion, every critic could be flagged. In a dim apartment in South Delhi, a small group of investigative reporters pored over leaked files by candlelight, afraid of being watched. "If half of this is true," one whispered, "we're living in a surveillance state." Not long after, their newsroom was raided under the pretext of tax violations. Hard drives were seized. 2 of the reporters fled the country. 1 stayed behind and vanished 2 weeks later. His family never found him. Meanwhile, inside the intelligence bureau, paranoia had reached a breaking point. Officers feared one another. Loyalty tests were conducted. Desks were searched. One deputy director was found dead in his car with a gunshot wound, ruled a suicide. But few believed that. "Someone wanted him silent," a retired IB veteran later said. "He knew too much." The deeper investigators looked, the clearer the picture became. The Bureau's vast intelligence machinery had been quietly repurposed for political control. Election strategies, opposition weaknesses, and even internal party rivalries were being fed through IB channels. The agency that once protected the state was now serving those in power. The scandal finally broke into the open when a former Home Secretary gave a sealed testimony to a parliamentary committee. Though much of it was redacted, one line survived. "I witnessed the use of national security apparatus for political surveillance. It was systemic." The fallout was immense. Parliamentary debates turned vicious. The media demanded answers. Civil rights groups called for investigations. But the Intelligence Bureau, protected by secrecy laws, denied access to all internal records. No officers were charged, no minister resigned. The storm passed quietly, leaving behind only rumors, whispers, and fear. Years later, a retired officer living in exile in London gave one final interview. His voice was low, his eyes tired. "It started with surveillance," he said. "But it ended with control. Once you know everyone's secrets, you own them." He paused, looking into the camera. And that's what they wanted all along. Across India, cameras now hang from every street corner. Data centers hum beneath government buildings. Citizens swipe cards, scan fingerprints, link IDs. Safety, they're told. Progress. Efficiency. But in the silence between words, a question lingers. Who's watching the watchers? In the end, the Intelligence Bureau remains untouchable. Its archives sealed, its agents unnamed, its secrets buried beneath decades of classified files. But in the echo of every intercepted call, in every shadowed alley and flickering light of Delhi, the memory of that scandal still lives, unspoken, unresolved, and undeniable. And somewhere, in a locked room filled with dust and silence, a file lies waiting, stamped in red, classified, Internal Surveillance 2013. No one dares to open it, because some secrets aren't meant to protect the nation, they're meant to protect the powerful. Endline. And as history has shown, the greatest threat to freedom rarely comes from the enemy outside. It comes from the ones sworn to defend it.